Commission members to turn on your microphones. I'm going to call to order the Charter Commission meeting, November 10th, 2021, 5 o'clock p.m. City Hall Council Chambers, Brainerd, Minnesota. Roll call, please. Jennifer Bergman.
Bevins. Chesak. Burton.
Here.
Yeager.
Yes.
O'Day.
Yes.
Marone. Shipe.
Here.
And Lambert.
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Very well. Moving on to item number 3. This will be the approval or amendment or any changes to our agenda.
Motion to approve?
Approve.
Lambert, second.
And second by Lambert. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Item number 4 is an approval of the minutes. Minutes are in your packet.
Lambert, so moved to accept.
Lambert,
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Very good. We have an approval of the minutes. First order of business, on old business, excuse me, is item number 5. This is an update on Evergreen Cemetery. Do we have a setup by Jennifer, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Attorney Langle is also joining us via WebEx, so he is joining us virtually. As you recall, we had a discussion at the last Charter Commission meeting about the Evergreen Cemetery and including them in the green space organization part of the charter instead of amending the charter. And the direction from the Charter Commission was for me to circle back around with Joe to make sure that that is something that was eligible. Joe's opinion on this is that a cemetery would not qualify as a green space organization. I did share this with Dwayne Blank as well as Tom Fitzpatrick. I met with Tom actually personally and let him know the Evergreen Cemetery would like to come back to the Charter Commission. They just did not feel like they were prepared to do that this evening, but has asked if the Charter Commission would be willing to have them back on their agenda at the December meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Bergman.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please, Jan.
may I ask what is our definition of green space?
Joe, are you here? Joe, I don't know if you're... Joe, we can't hear you, so hang on. No,
It's like going back in time.
we are. It's been too long, we forgot how to do this. Joe, can you hear us? Yeah, we just can't. Do you check your mic settings? You want to call in?
Don't worry, we're just waiting for him to figure out his...
Hi, Kelly.
For who to?
Attorney language.
Mr. Lang will have the ability to call in.
For who to?
I think that's what he's trying to
Looks like
do.
he's dialing.
Yep.
I see him.
Sign language.
Hi, Mr. Chair.
How are you, sir?
If I were Jim
Sorry I'm
Tureen, I'd
late, we had to
sing.
finish the keg.
No problem.
He didn't- you know,
As a point of order, we should note that Mr. Bevins is now in attendance.
Aha.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can. Do you want to mute your computer, Joe?
Yeah, hold on a second.
All right,
All right, how's that?
Better.
Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Langle.
I'm not sure what's going on there. I thought that it's 3 times to work, but
We'll do it
we'll do it this way. The question was, what is green space? And the city code does not, as far as I know, contain a definition of green space. In my experience, green space is space that is utilized for the public, and this is consistent with what the Arboretum's purpose was to connect people to nature and to protect the natural environment. It's not just open grass, it's green space for a purpose. And that was the concern, if you want to call it that, on my end, in terms of whether a cemetery can really constitute a green space.
Thank you, Mr. Langle. Any other questions or comments here?
No, I
Hi,
never.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Please, Mr. Bevins.
And it's for the attorney, but I'll ask you because you're sitting here. Well, or he's listening, right? Can the EDA pay money to the cemetery like we've done for other things like the Main Street program without changing the charter? To the cemetery or other things?
Mr. Langle?
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, not that I'm aware of, because that would not be consistent with the purpose of an economic development authority. Their authority is statutory, and it has, within that statute, a certain list of things that EDAs can do and what their purpose is. And I don't recollect anything in there that would cover a cemetery because it's not really economic development per se of any kind.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Day, please.
So, without putting it in the charter, they could still just go to the council annually and ask for whatever amount they would like as well, correct?
I don't think so.
Mr. O'Day, actually, that's where this whole this whole conversation started, was with the that concept. And the problem that underlies all of this is there's a statute out there that authorizes cities to provide cemeteries up to $10,000 per year for whatever the cemetery wants to do with it. The problem is that that statute, since 1953, has only granted that authority to statutory cities and fourth class charter cities. So first, second, and third class charter cities do not have that authority, and of course, Brainerd is a third class charter city. So that statutory authority isn't there.
I have another
And in
question.
the absence of that authority, the answer is no, that the city cannot just write off a check to a cemetery.
Please.
So, by the cemetery asking to put themselves into the charter, or have the charter commission ask to put them in the charter, would be against statutory regulation, correct? Which is what something that we started off this whole process, getting rid of anything that goes against statutory regulation. So, this would.
Yeah, Mr. Day, I agree that putting this expressly in the charter so that Brainerd would be utilizing a levy or whatever funds to pay a cemetery would be directly contrary to that statute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Scheib, please.
Attorney Langle, is there a more broad term that would cover, so green space is too narrow to cover the arb and a cemetery. Is there a more broad term the charter could adopt that would include what the cemetery is as well as, say, a park or the arb or things like that?
Well, I'm not sure what that term would be, I guess. Parks are closer to the art in terms of the concept of green space. Cemeteries are unique properties. I don't know what term would include all that. And of course, even if you could come up with a term, you still have the problem with this underlying statute that does not allow it. So any attempt to create a category that somehow includes cemeteries has the potential, if anybody were to so object to it, to conflict with the statute. I mean, that's my underlying concern here.
Mrs. Bergman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I just have a clarification, probably for Joe. So it is my understanding that the city of Brainerd cannot make, the city cannot make appropriations unless it is specifically called out in the charter. Therefore, we can make and have made appropriations to organizations like the Arboretum, the Senior Center, and Brainerd Community Action, because those three were specifically called out in the charter. As I understood it, that we could amend the charter to include Evergreen Cemetery. We just couldn't, the city council could not make appropriations unless it's called out in the charter. Am I incorrect in that, Joe?
I think the last portion of that is problematic because if you, and this is following up on Mr. O'Day's question, if the city were to put in a charter what is prohibited in a statute, that's problematic. So the other things, Arboretum and the Senior Center, all that kind of stuff, none of that's prohibited by statute. And you're allowed under the levy law to levy for those things. The problem with the cemetery is that it is specifically addressed in a statute in terms of donations. So yeah, if you put that in the charter, we've got a potential problem there in terms of the charter directly conflicting with that statute.
Mr. Bevins.
Mr. Lango, what if we just give money to Crow Wing County? Right, they're the other portion of funding entity for this cemetery.
Is that is that grant to Crow Wing County going to have any strings attached to it, like say to for a cemetery?
No, of course not. We share the bus company with them, we share the airport with them, we have a working relationship. It could be to clean the bathrooms at the airport, I don't know. Can we give money to Crow Wing County?
I don't think you can just flat out give money to Crow Wing County for no reason whatsoever.
Okay.
We've got, as you indicated, relationships with them under various joint powers agreements, and that's certainly allowed by statute. Just giving them money with no strings or explanation attached to it in the hopes that they will then put it towards the cemetery, I think we would struggle trying to find authority for that type of situation.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
I know you said power agreements. Would a partnership fall under that if we did a partnership with Crow Wing County? Or would it have to be a power agreement? Power, whatever you called it. Could we do a partnership with
Well,
the
joint
Crow Wing?
powers agreements are between political entities such as, cities and counties have joint powers agreements all the time. But what you're talking about there is, I don't know that you could, even if you did that, let's say that you could somehow squeeze that under the joint powers agreement statute, the effect of it is still to fund a cemetery with city tax dollars.
Okay.
So effectively, you still have a problem with the statute that says you can't do that. I'm just trying to keep the city out of trouble in terms of its the levy, its levy authority and its use of public tax dollars.
Mr. Bevins?
I presume, but I'm gonna ask, that our neighbors to the west, the city of Baxter, because they own their own cemetery, that's a different deal?
Correct. Yeah, cities can do that. Cities can also take on a cemetery. I believe there's a statute for that. A cemetery that's currently operating can be transferred to a city if the city accepts that transfer by resolution. So yeah, that's a different deal.
Right, like if they went bankrupt, which we were told, led to believe may happen.
Yeah, there's another statute as well that I believe deals with that too, that if a cemetery becomes defunct, a city can take it over.
Thank you. Anyone else?
And, Mr. Chair, and then we
Yes.
wouldn't have any of these problems then, right, if the city took that over?
Oh, no.
No? Okay, no, I
It would,
just
it
wanted
would,
to
it would
ask.
be very expensive for the
Oh,
city.
I
to
know
take
that,
over.
but I mean, okay, that's,
So it would be cheaper for us to donate $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year, but
we can't.
if we can't, we can't.
Anyone else? I have just a couple one quick question here. I want to cycle back and make sure I'm understanding something. This Charter Commission has bantered about with dialogue regarding the senior center, the arboretum, and specifically, we've talked about removing the specific names of arboretum, changing that to green space, changing the center to senior related program. Am I to understand correctly that you're saying that is a problem to remove specific recipients? Okay. So my follow-up question is, where is the definition of green space found?
Well, as indicated before, the city does not have that defined, to my knowledge, in its ordinance. It's a term that's not uncommonly used in city codes, for example, there's subdivision or zoning ordinances
Right.
to define the areas, for example, in PUDs where the city is requiring the developer to create green space.
Understood.
And
Where
that
I'm going with this,
specifically
Mr. Lang, oh,
natural
sorry.
area for people to, I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, please continue.
Well, I'm just saying that term is, go ahead, Mr. Yeager, sorry.
Where I was going with this is if the definition is something that we can control within city limits, meaning within our own ordinance or within our own documentation, can we not just change the definition of green space to a broader term that then we can use within?
The short answer to that is yes. Yes, you could. But again, keep in mind that if someone were to object to this and put it before a judge and say this is just an attempt to subvert the statute, then the city may have a problem.
Understood.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
I know Mr. Langle said something about use of public. If the cemetery could prove that they are of value to the public, that the public is using that as walkways, as, their pathways and walking and all that stuff, would that make a difference? I mean, that's one thing they brought out, that it's actively used for the public, for walking the trails or the roads or whatever are in there, so.
Mr. Langle, did you hear the question?
I did, thank you. And it's not uncommon for cemeteries to be used by people for that purpose. And to your point, Mr. Yeager, I suppose you could try to work that concept into a definition of green space. But I don't think that gets rid of the underlying or fundamental potential for a statutory problem.
Very good. So as a follow-up, do we have now a statutory problem with giving money to a senior-based program versus the center?
No, I don't believe so, because like I said before, there is no analogous statute concerning that type of organization. It just so happens that cemeteries are regulated and there are statutes about who can support them. There's no similar statutes for example, senior centers.
Understood. Mr. Langle, would it be a worthwhile exercise to ask city staff to explore if the definition could be wordsmithed into such a way to include a cemetery, or are you advising as of right now that this is absolutely something that we should not pursue?
Well, my point is simply that you've got a risk here with respect to that statute. And, you know, any attempt to wordsmith a cemetery into your charter, I am concerned that you are in effect violating that statute. So, yes, my conservative advice is to not go down that road.
Understood.
Mr. Chair?
Please, Mr. Shipe, I got you.
Mr. Langle, if the city were to provide, I don't know, material assistance, so if the park board or the parks department was to maintain a trail in the cemetery, would that fall under the same restrictions if it's not a monetary donation? Yeah. I see your smile, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's trying to be creative ways to go around the same bush here, and I don't know that it makes much difference. Because are you then funding just the trail, or are you funding the general upkeep and maintenance and so forth of the entire cemetery?
Mr. O'Day, please.
I think the problem comes down to Evergreen Cemeteries not raising enough funds because they're not selling anything, and we can't legally, it sounds like, just give them money. So what we could do is look for creative ways to help them raise money. There's an organization that just raised $200,000 in a matter of weeks. People are looking to donate to causes like this. People use Evergreen Cemetery, so I don't see a problem with just looking in other directions as far as helping them with maybe a marketing campaign or getting the word out more.
We're not looking at huge funds, huge numbers here,
Not really.
just to keep them afloat, so.
Right.
I would like to encourage everyone in this room to keep the ideas going and to see if we can, in fact, some way, including city staff and Mr. Langle, if there's any way that we can work a way to help the cemetery through this, be great. But it sounds like we're running into some dead ends here.
The two last things we want are the cemetery to just look like garbage.
Right.
And go to crap, or be just handed over to the city and have our responsibility to take care of. So if we can avoid either of those things, we win.
100% agreed.
And Mr. Chair, if I
Please.
may, maybe one more option too is we could reach out to Senator Rude and Representative Heinzman to see if they could maybe author some special legislation or recommend an amendment. I don't know, Joe, is that an approach to the state statute, which then could potentially allow us?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Ms. Bergman, I think that's actually a great idea because, like I said, the statute's been around for 60 years, and it's not really apparent as to why there was such a distinction made between statutory cities, fourth-class cities, and the rest of the charter cities, first, second, and third. I don't know why. I can't understand the rationale. So yeah, if we could get that little two-paragraph
Can't be the only
statute modified, that would be wonderful.
With cemeteries going the way they are, we can't be the only city.
Exactly. That was my point with other conversations. If this is in fact a trend nationwide, there's got to be other municipalities, other charter cities that are coming up with ways to help with this. So.
And Mr. Chair, we will continue to work with Evergreen Cemetery and see if we can't come up with a solution.
Very good. And Ms. Jennifer, will you please communicate with, or somebody with Evergreen, because maybe next meeting isn't the right timing yet?
Yes.
If something develops.
Yep.
Any
I will
further
circle back
comments?
around.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Shipe.
Mr. Langle, would you mind sharing that statute with us? I'm just curious to have that for reference next time Evergreen does come to the commission. Be nice to have.
Yeah, hold on a second here. It's Minnesota statute section 471.84. It's all one sentence long.
Really?
Thank you.
Yep.
Very good. If there's no other comments, we're going to move on to considering the red line version of Chapter 6, Public Utilities Committee. Any other lingering comments? Very good. Then we're going to move on. Mrs. Bergman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. As you recall, we did have this on your agenda. Back in October, we did end up asking to have that postponed, as we did not have enough time to be able to meet internally to have a discussion about that red line version. Staff did meet back on October 18th. It was Chris, Paul, Connie, me, Scott, and Todd met with Attorney Langle to go through that red line version. After that meeting, Attorney Langle did take the comments that he had heard and sent us back a draft, a new red line version draft, which was sent by Joe on October 26th. I didn't receive any comments, and so that is the version that is included in your packet. So I think you have all of us here tonight, as well as some BPU commissioners as well. So whichever direction you'd like to take this, Attorney Langle is also on the call, and maybe if you want to go through it, I would ask Joe to kind of go through each one of the changes so he can describe what they are and what the intent is of the amendment, proposed amendment.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think that sounds good to me, but before we jump into that, I just want to give if anyone else would like to speak prior to us jumping into it, to how this came about, what we see in front of us. If there's anything that anyone would like to say, I'd like to give them the opportunity to speak first, anyone that's in the gallery here, or in tow here with us. So if not, then we'll continue on to Mr. Langle and have him just kind of walk us through this, I think. So now would be the time if anyone wants to preface us walking through this.
I think as part of our discussion, the points that I think that the commission will want to address and to look at will be in that section 4 part. I think some of the other changes we can walk our way through and talk through, but there's a couple words in number 4 that I think we'll need to take a look at. So we'll look forward to hearing what his explanation will be, and then we'll go from there.
Very good, thank you. All right, Mr. Langle, are you prepared to kind of just walk us through this, even though we're doing it half by phone, half by screen? Are we okay?
Okay on my end, if everybody can still hear me.
Very good. Lead us through it, sir.
All right. All right, thank you. So starting with section 1, section 1 is really just a clarification, sort of a modernization of the language. The language that was in there was quite dated. And it just kind of fleshes out more what BPU really operates at this point. So we fleshed out the waterworks system, including the plant, the towers, distribution system, the wastewater system, and clarified what BPU operates versus what the City Public Works Department operates, because it is somewhat shared in terms of operational control. And then we sort of using the term electric light plant in business, we have electric generation and distribution system, and then had a catch-all at the end stating that all the public utilities that are hereafter owned by the city would also be part of BPU's operation. So it's really just a fleshing out and clarification of what's there.
And I'm just going to stop at the end of each section and just, if anybody has any questions, jump in at the end of each section. Thank you, Mr. Langle.
Yep. So number 2 is just some capitalization. Number 3 had a lot of discussion about what the secretary of the commission does or did do. I believe at the time that this language was created, this was a much smaller operation, and the secretary would have been far more hands-on. What we did here was remove a lot of this because that work, to the extent that that stuff even happens anymore, is really done by Todd. And while Todd is, I believe, still the secretary, that work is not being done because he's the secretary. It's being done because of his normal job title for BPU. So that's why all those changes were made in Section 3. That was just reduced to what would be consistent with what like a secretary and a corporate board would typically do. It's really what it was reduced down to.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Shipe. 1 second, Mr. Langle.
I had a quick question, just terminology. The park board section of the charter has a similar role defined, but calls it a clerk. Is that a term that should be different between the two, or does it make sense to standardize it throughout the charter?
I believe we removed the clerk language as a part of our last version of revisions.
Oh, I've got an old one then. Okay.
I'm not positive, but I believe I believe we caught that on the last round of revisions for the park board.
And Attorney Langle, didn't you say that the secretary is defined in state statute for the PUC?
Yes, that term is used in the statutory provisions concerning Public Utilities Commission, so that's why I'm sure it was carried over into the charter language.
Makes perfect sense.
Thank you. All right, here it is, number 4. Everyone ready?
So number 4 has to do with employing personnel to fulfill the mission of Brainerd Public Utilities. And it previously stated that the commission shall have power to appoint an employee and fix compensation and so forth. And now what it states is that the council shall employ all necessary help for the commission to perform its duties and approve all terms and conditions of employment. The personnel for vacant positions may be recommended by the commission to the council, and that all commission personnel are subject to the city's personnel policies. So this is it's a change and it's not. The part about commission personnel being subject to city's personnel policies, I believe they already are and ought to be, because they're all city employees. And it's important that they all be operating under the same rules, same guidelines across the board, so that we don't have one department, if you will, of the city acting in a manner that is completely different than the rest of the city. And in terms of the terms and conditions of employment, I believe the city council is already involved in approving collective bargaining agreements for personnel and so forth. So that's not necessarily a big change. The biggest change here is probably the first phrase: the city council shall employ all necessary help, as opposed to the commission employing them. The council approves all other jobs, all other employees in the city. I believe it's the intent of this paragraph for the commission to make the recommendations. So they would open up the position, they would advertise for the position, they would interview for the position, and they would make recommendations to the city council. The city council then would take the formal step of hiring for those positions, just like they do every other position in the city, whether it's public works, police department, etc. So this is really making the system uniform across the city. And a big part of the reason behind all this is that by having the city council ultimately in charge of all employees, then we have the same entity that can respond and regulate all employees across the board. If we have a department that is doing something outside the control of the council, and that leads to liability of some kind, whether it's negligent supervision, negligent hiring, discrimination, what have you, the entity that gets sued isn't BPU, the entity that gets sued is the city. And so we want the one entity who's liable for it to also have control over it. So there isn't some disconnect there between the actions and the liability. So that's really what's underlying that first phrase there, is to make it uniform and make sure that they're all subject to the same rules and regulations. There's also the impact of the Equal Pay Act, that we want to make sure that the entire city is operating in a manner that conforms to the act. There have been a couple of issues with that recently, where BPU's salary structure had an impact on the salary structure in the rest of the city or other portions of the city. That, you know, there's nothing that the rest of the city council could do about it, because they don't have control over it. So in order to make that really function as one organization and function properly, that's why this was written the way that it is, that the city council shall employ all necessary help. So that's the rationale behind it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Langle. Okay, do we want to stop and chit chat about 4 here a little bit? Please come on up. It's, I don't speak for the entire board, but this seems like a no-brainer to me, so I'm anxious to hear what it is that I'm missing.
I think I understand what the attorney is saying, but at the same time, I'm just going to use myself as an example. When I retire, which seems to be getting closer and closer each day, but when I retire, how is that process going to work? Who ultimately makes the decision as to who becomes the new finance director for BPU? Is it the city council or is it the BPU commission? Who does my review? I mean, I know we do a lot of things that eventually gets approved by the city, but I think what I'm reading is that there's more micromanaging kind of in this first sentence than I think what's intended, because who hires for my position? Can the commission make a recommendation, but the council say, no, we don't want that person, type of thing? That's what I'm concerned about, is who ultimately has decision. I know the council is blessing all, you know, the wages, the resolutions, all of these, the policies that we're subject to, but I just think this is, they shall employ all, you know, personnel for the BPU commission. It seems like, I don't know if that's going down the way, I know the park board, you know, asked for a change in how they did their employees, but as far as I know, the commission hasn't asked that we need to change how we're doing that. And so that's just my concern related to that. I guess I'll turn it over to maybe some of the commissioners may have something to say.
Please.
Hey, Commission. I'm Commissioner Johnson from the BPU, and I think when you take away the power, you know, to hire and set rates for our employees, that's basically all of the Commission's responsibilities. I mean, if you look through everything else, controlling, operating, and managing the utilities, it's all done by manpower, right? So the Commission, we serve at the pleasure of the City Council. The mayor appoints us, we're approved by the City Council. So the city approves our budget. The way it's been working seems to be fine for the commission to operate, to take the work off the City Council. If you pass, you know, if we change the charter to say that the City Council is going to employ all the manpower, that kind of takes any responsibility or duties away from the commission whatsoever. So if the City Council still wants a commission to exist, to take that burden off and have us dig into the complexities of running a utility company, I think that's like the most important piece of what it means to be on that commission, because it's all about the people. So that's my comments.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else?
If no one else is talking, I can comment on that.
Mr. O'Day, please.
This is, I read through this once and I didn't think of it as deeply as Attorney Langle has gone into it. I don't see this as being any change in the commission in what you guys do other than the final say of yes or no. And I don't think that that's a very big deal to change that. Somebody's going to be hired to take Todd's position in a few years whenever he decides to retire. Something majorly wrong would have to be wrong with that person for us, the City Council, to say, no, this isn't going to work. I don't remember one time since I've been on, and it's only been this year, that the council has even questioned who we're going to hire. And the council certainly isn't going to get into the weeds as far as the details of what that commission is going to do as far as directing the business end of BPU. I think it all comes down to the liability. You know, the financial situations probably wouldn't change at all based on this right now, but maybe they could change in the future for people that replace or people that retire that are in place right now. That's all I see changing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Lambert.
I guess I'm looking at it this way. This way we're changing it is going to put it more in line of how we hire in other departments, the actual employees. We're not really talking about the commissioners here. We're talking, because the commissioners are appointed by the mayor. But this is how the hiring processes go. What this, like the police department or the, city administrators, we have a procedure. Now, this sounds like it's going to be this more in line with what we do with the rest of our positions within the city. Am I wrong in that? To me, this sounds like the BPU has a whole different way of hiring. Is that true?
So, Mr. Chair,
Please,
I
Ms.
had raised my hand because I thought it might be helpful to hear from Chris on the hiring process and how it works.
Chris, please.
So, to answer Jan's question, I believe that's the intent of this language change,
bring
is
it-
to make it more uniform throughout the city. As far as how this would change, I briefly talked to Todd about this morning. And does the commission need to talk about every single BPU employee? Do they need to approve it? Do they need to approve a laborer, or could it go under the city council? To me, that is really a no-brainer. It kind of goes back to Mike O'Day. Staff makes the recommendation, we do the whole process, and the council even allows us to ratify the hiring after that person started, if we follow the council procedure for steps and things like that. And I also mentioned to Todd for the BPU finance director or the management team. I cannot believe that the council wouldn't want the commission involved. The commission is the ones that work very closely with that position. I helped when Scott was hired as our BPU superintendent. I helped with that process. The commission did do the interviewings and things like that, but I think that's the reason of that second sentence that says the commission may recommend someone. And I think if the commission wanted to make a recommendation, they would let the council know, and the council would talk. It could be a joint effort.
So-
Did that answer your question, Jan?
It does, and Mr. Chair,
please.
I think it's very important that we keep the procedures of how we do the hiring in that, be consistent throughout the city. So I'm in support of this.
Any other comments? Please.
I think I'm a little confused, only because when you break up the original red line version, which is now blue, but the commission shall have the power to appoint and employ all necessary help to properly perform its duties. I do believe that when you're hiring specialty people such as linemen, you want the people that are actually working with them on a daily basis to be doing the interviewing to see if they're proper candidates, right? My concern is, by eliminating that and simply just stating the city council shall employ all necessary, my concern is, why are we not just blending those two sentences? That the commission shall continue to have the power to appoint and employ with the recommendation, and the city council shall, approve any, shall have the ability to approve or deny those appointments. I guess my concern is why are we taking that level out of it? And I agree, the city council does need to approve, but the city council is also approving our budget. It's also approving, the step plan. It approved every piece of that. So that's the part I'm not understanding why we're maybe not blending that a little bit better than eliminating that first sentence altogether. I just want to bring that up. Thanks.
Mr. Langle, did you hear the comment, the question?
I did.
Can you shed some light on this, please?
And Bruce can probably flesh this out some more too, perhaps, but to the point that the commission or BPU staff should be involved, my understanding is that they still would be involved in terms of bringing forth a recommendation to the city council for hiring. And that goes to Mr. O'Day's point that if they do that, then historically that's who gets hired in terms of a concern about a position that's complex or involves specific job duties, you know, cities hire police officers all the time. We hire engineers. We hire all sorts of people with very specific requirements for the job. So I guess from my perspective, which is, you know, sort of more from the 10,000 foot level, I guess I don't see a lineman, for example, being all that different than a number of other positions that the city council hires.
I have a question to you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Day.
Say that the commission needs a linesman today, and they want to hire that linesman today, but we don't have a meeting or can't get it on the agenda for 2 weeks, and that linesman has been working, we can always hire them and ratify that in retrospect, and they're technically employed when that commission would say so, correct? Or would that bring up a new liability in that they haven't not been approved by the council in this?
Well, Ms. Schubert can confirm, but I believe that that's already being done. It's already been done historically, that the city, in situations where there are timing issues, has conditionally hired someone to be ratified and affirmed by the city council.
I was going to say, I think we do that with police.
We do it already.
We do with park staff also.
Correct. And part of what I liked about the maybe part is that currently, right now, we are working with the Civil Service Commission, and it adds another layer to our hiring process. And same with the Park Board. If you have another board that has to make a recommendation before you can do that, it's going to delay your hiring process. So you may lose quality people, because if they're looking, they're going to go with the first offer they get or the best offer they get. I can't guarantee they would wait for us. The commission only meets once a month. So you have to wait till the commission would actually meet and then go to the council, is the way I'm thinking of this. So to make it more efficient, that's why I think it's better to go this way, where the city council has it. And then if the commission wants to be involved, that's where the may comes in.
Thank you. Any other comments? Very good. We're going to continue on to number 5, Mr. Langle.
Commission members, number 5 was really just a fairly simple clarification, adding wastewater in there. Nothing terribly substantive, frankly, number 5.
Very good.
And then if I may, moving on to number 6. Number 6 has to do with expansion of the systems and what they have authority to expand without permission of the city council, and when city council authority is required. So as it stands right now, it says no water or wastewater utility may be extended beyond the existing service territories unless the council orders. That was always true with water. Now it just includes wastewater as well. And then we define what service territories means. Those that are currently served by mains and laterals, service lines are different. We wanted to keep those out of the city council, because that's a routine sort of work for the BPU to extend service lines. So that's water and wastewater. The next new paragraph or subparagraph there talks about the electrical utility. The service territory rather, for that is established by the State Public Utilities Commission. The council and the BPU don't have any control over it. So any extension of the utility outside the service territory by contract, and Todd can explain to you when that happens, shall be approved by the city council. Any extension within the service territory or any contract with another utility to provide power within the commission's service territory shall be approved by the commission. So if it's inside the territory, the BPU can just do what it's always done. If it's going outside the service territory, which sometimes happens by contract, that has to run to the city council.
Okay, thank you.
Paragraph 7 deals with the budget issues. The word operating was added in there, I believe, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was added in there by you. And then 5-year capital improvement plan. And the point of that is just to, and you guys see these all the time, like from Public Works and so forth, is to kind of get in writing what the BPU sees as the big ticket items coming down the road for the next 5 years. The rest of it is mostly just capitalization issues. So that's paragraph number 7.
All right, very good. So at this point, I'm just going to turn it over to anyone who would like to talk about this. Before I do that, can you, Jennifer, please just kind of let us know what our action item, what we'd like to see for action on this?
Sure, Mr. Chair, before
We're
we
gonna talk
move
about it
on,
first.
there is paragraph number 8 and 9 are left yet too,
Yep.
if we want Joe to.
Oh, got it. I thought he was turning it back over to me. He lumped them together.
Yeah. So we've got chapter 8 and 9.
Very good, yeah.
I believe it's just 8, isn't it, Jennifer?
Just 8, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, 9 is deleted and 8
They're
was
like combined,
revised.
yeah.
Yeah, so the next section has to do with the county records. The language that had been in there was outdated. And so it was replaced with this language about the finance director, so that's Mr. Wickland, keeping a complete set of accounting records, which is what, that's what they do currently. Keeping all funds belonging to the commission of the bank designated by the city council. All funds are deposited in the name of the commission. They have an investment policy, the city does, that they follow. And they make transfers to the city and have been doing so for quite a few years in amounts that are specified by the policy that the BPU adopted in 2003, and I think it's been amended 2 or 3 times since then. So really that paragraph just was intended to reflect what currently occurs. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Langle. All right, Jennifer, can you set us up on kind of what the action items are that lie before us with what we see in front of us?
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Our recommended action is to approve the proposed changes that were presented to you and direct staff to prepare an ordinance amending Chapter 6 of the Public Utilities Commission of the Charter for council consideration. When we had met internally, staff, and then sent this out, I guess I had assumed, since I had not received any other comments, that we had concurred on this chapter of the charter. I was not aware. So our recommendation, I think, does stand, is that we propose these changes for an ordinance.
Very good. Now, at this time, I'm going to swing it back to us for any discussions in closing or anything that we want to touch base on.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, Ms. Lambert.
I just have a clarification. Now, I know when we talked about 3, Todd was talking about the secretary and the finance director, you're both, and those positions are usually together? Or they are now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wanted, okay, that's clarification. That's all I need to know. Thanks,
Thank you,
Chair.
Jan. Anyone else? All right, guys. Anyone care to take a dive at a motion here?
Go ahead.
Move to approve the red line version and direct staff to send this to the council.
Lambert, second?
Got a motion to approve and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Sorry, Jan, please.
One thing I'm going to say, it's nice to see that we have some conformity with hiring policies. I think that's very good.
I'll comment as well. I don't see this as changing a whole lot of stuff for you guys. Maybe there's some language in there that seems like it, but honestly, I don't, other than the liability, I don't see a whole lot of change. I think this just protects the city as an entity of just one more step.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we're going to go number 6, new business. We have none, correct?
Mr. Chair, we have no new business.
Wow, look at that. I think we're done, right, for life then?
Motion to adjourn forever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kidding.
All right, we have a motion.
Wait, we could get rid of the stupid primary that this
Is that,
charter commission put forth.
is that a motion?
Whoa.
Oh, yeah, dang it.
So, Mark, are you making a forever adjournment? I'll
No.
second it.
No.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to a normal adjournment and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.